Hi everyone. So if you're following our schedule, which I'm sure you are, you're looking at this video on Tuesday. Yesterday, you watched a video of me reading chapter 18, which was called The Phone Call. We learned a lot of new information. Leo seems to think we read that chapter already. I saw that comment, but I'm pretty sure we haven't. But if we did, we know that rereading is great and always helps us, so I'm not worried. Today we're going to read chapter 19. Chapter 19 is called The Children's Home. This is going to be a big one. We've been hearing a lot about this children's home on 11th Street. I have so many questions. Before we start reading, we're going to do a little bit of work like good readers do. So, one of the words that's going to come up in this chapter is called breathless. If you're watching this, say breathless. When you're breathless, you're kind of like gasping for air, you're having trouble breathing. Sometimes because you're tired. For example, in gym class, after running around, you might feel breathless. But it can also be because you're feeling such strong emotions. You're feeling so happy, so angry, just anything that's so strong you can't even catch your breath. So you're gonna hear the word breathless in this chapter. Another phrase you're gonna hear, which is a few words together. It's called a wild goose chase. So when you hear that, I don't want you to think that they're actually chasing a wild goose around. That would be quite silly. What they mean is they're kind of chasing this silly, hopeless dream. They want something, they're trying to achieve it, but it's not really possible. It's kind of silly. It's a wild goose chase. So listen up for those phrases and those words as we read chapter 19. So, chapter 19. The Children's Home. Sam was awake half the night. Did he really want to do this? He stumbled out of bed in the morning and dressed. Mac was in the workroom. Sam took a breath. I'm going to see Caroline. It's her last day. Mac nodded. Nice. Go ahead. It's warm, sunny. A good idea. If Mac really knew, Sam thought. Pause. Is he just going to see Caroline? No. Mac is going to the children's home on 11th Street with Caroline. He ate a quick breakfast of juice and muffins at Onji's and asked for an extra sandwich for Caroline. Her last day, he said again. Onji looked up, a roll in his hand. A picnic. Good. 5 minutes later, Sam was jogging along the road, breathless. He reached the stores at the end of town. Caroline was just ahead of him, wearing a purple hat and a wooden necklace over her sweater. She grabbed his hand and tugged as she started to run. We're late, she said. He'd never held hands with a girl before. Her hands were warm and a little smaller than his. It made him smile, even though he couldn't imagine how this day would end. Must be feeling very nervous, excited, a lot of emotions. We may have missed the bus, she said. We'll have to wait a half hour for the next one. They crossed the street in front of the bank and went to stand at the stop in front of the Circle Diner. The bus was nowhere in sight. I'll ask inside, he said, as Caroline bent to close the Velcro on her sneakers. He poked his head in the door. Did the bus leave yet? Tom, at the counter, hardly looked at him. New York City or West? West, Caroline called in. Just missed it. Caroline rolled her eyes. Let's go sit in the booth. I have plenty of money. He had money too, but he couldn't imagine swallowing anything. He followed her inside the empty diner and slid into the booth on the end. They sat there, not talking, until Tom brought the hot chocolates Caroline had called for them across the room. Sam ignored his cup with the small marshmallows floating on top. Interesting, Sam's not drinking his hot chocolate, which sounds delicious, so he must really be having a lot of feelings right now. Tell me what's going on. He leaned across the table. She pulled out the notebook. While you were doing nothing, he grinned. I looked at the map. I started at the towns along the St. Lawrence River and looked on the internet, trying to link two things together with the phone information. The children's home and Clayton's. You know, the picture of Mac and Lydia in front of the hardware store. There's a town called Clayton. He took a breath. But that's not it. There's another town called Waterway. She frowned. Waterway? And there's a Clayton hardware store and the children's home. Well, almost. There's an 11th Street. He sat back. He wouldn't find anything. He wanted to laugh with surprise and a feeling that was something like relief. Maybe he didn't have to know about himself. Maybe he could just stay with Mac and Anima and Onji forever. Onji always talked about wild goose chases, and this would be a neat wild goose chase. They'd take the bus and eat Onji's lunch. It was a great day after all. The sun was shining. They'd have a last day they'd always remember. He picked up the mug of chocolate and downed it in one gulp. I'm going to pause there. So Sam is thinking about this adventure kind of as a wild goose chase. So that must mean that Sam doesn't really think it's not gonna tell him too much, right? Kind of a hopeless adventure. Let's find out if Sam's right. I hope it's not a hopeless adventure. She must have been thinking the same thing. She stretched. Just think, we'll have this whole scoop of a day. She hesitated. One thing. She leaned closer, her eyes so large, those freckles like constellations. One thing. Her favorite thing to say. I might be wrong, and if I am, let's write this all out for you before I go. She opened her notebook. Begin at the beginning. The chocolate was suddenly a lump in his stomach, the marshmallows so gluey he could still taste them on his tongue. Caroline was holding a pen. Okay, go, she said. The beginning. Wow, so before Caroline leaves, it looks like she's going to write down everything that they've talked about so far. That's very nice of her. The beginning. My parents died. The book was between them. She wrote at an angle. Parents. Parents. He could see that. I ended up in the children's home. In the same town? In Mac's town. Onji's town. Yes, I think so. Her head was bent, and he didn't bother to read what she wrote now. A terrible woman, a boy who took my boat. She slapped. Mean to all of us, I think. To the cat. I was so afraid of the cat. So these are all of Sam's memories are coming back. Something tugged at the edge of his mind. Mac had built the toy boat for him, and he was sure of it. He must have known Mac while he was at the home. How did that fit? He thought of footsteps in a castle, the sound of a hammer, banging doors. There was no time to tell Caroline more. The bus was pulling up in front of the diner. He left money on the table and they boarded the bus, stopping to pay in back of an old man carrying a fishing rod. In one of the back seats, Caroline opened her lunch, a mess of a sandwich, 2 slabs of cheese surrounded by bread. Horrible, he said. How can you still be hungry? I'm always hungry. Good, I have lunch for you. They sat there, not talking. He watched the hills flatten out. The bus traveled along next to a fast-moving stream, and people fished rocks along the way. After a while, Sam was hungry too, but not hungry enough for the meatball hero. He dug into the bag to find 2 packages of saltines. He handed one to Caroline and then leaned against the window chewing. Every once in a while, the bus stopped to pick up passengers or to let them off. The man with the fishing rod nodded at them as he got off the back door. And then the driver called out, "Waterway, New York." And they went down the steps. Nothing looked familiar to Sam. Not the stores on Main Street, not the park with its benches at one end, not the wooden church with its square steeple at the other. Caroline glanced at him. I'm going into the bakery. I'll ask. Don't suppose... Was this the place? And if it was, he almost felt the store owners would see him. There's that kid from the home, the kid from the boating accident. Pause there. So Sam is worried. He's in this new town, and all of these people are seeing him, and Sam's saying, wait a minute. What if they remember me? What if I'm that boy from the children's home who had a boating accident in the night? There's all these memories are coming back to Sam. Let's see what happens. Sam, it was years ago. Do you think you still look like the kid in that picture? Do you think anyone would know who you are? Before he could answer, she disappeared inside the store. He leaned against the brick wall, sun warmed even this early in the day. She was back. There's a children's home. She was back. There is a children's home. Was a children's home. The baker told me how to get there. Amazing, isn't it? Sam felt the sudden heat in his face. He swallowed against the catch in his throat. Caroline took his hand again, and they went down the street, past the church and onto a small road that wound its way along in back of the main part of town. He walked more slowly, and then, at the second turn, where trees began to meet over the path, he stopped. Wait a minute, he said. Just wait. It's there, but it isn't. It was closed down years ago. Caroline tugged at his hand. No one's there, Sam. So Sam is quite worried about going to this children's home, but Caroline's telling him, Sam, there's no need to worry. It is there, but it was closed down, so no one's inside. Let's see if anyone's inside. He walked with her up a lane that was choked with dandelions, showing their yellow tops. Gravel, gray and scattered, crunched under their feet. He remembered the sound of gravel. Someone brought me here, carried me on his shoulder. I was crying, cold, and he put his scarf around me. I'm sorry, Sam. Her voice was low. I'm so sorry for the little kid that you were. He saw the scarf clearly, dark with flecks of red, felt the warmth of it against his cheeks, but he couldn't see the man's face. Was it Mac? Caroline asked. No, not Mac. I don't think it was anyone I knew. He pieced it out of his mouth. Steps. No one to take him, probably no family. And someone, a neighbor maybe, had brought him here? He remembered carrying the small sailboat. Sam took a step, turned a corner. The building appeared suddenly in front of him. He stepped back, almost as if he'd been hit. It was really there, that terrible place, much more than a house, with its massive double doors in front, the number 11 over them, smaller doors on each end. 11, of course. He leaned against a tree, almost forgetting that Caroline was watching him. He heard the sound of banging doors, the sound of shouting. Sam waited for his breath to come back, staring at the place. Everything needed paint. Boards on the front porch were missing. He stopped then, his eyes going to the roof. Pieces of slate cracked, but the two chimneys. My mother was teaching me numbers, I think, he said, the blur of her face in front of him. I turned my head over the man's shoulder the day we came, and I saw on the house 11, and then a pair of chimneys, so huge up there in the sky. They look like the number 11 too. A lot of memories are coming back. Just chimneys after all, just the house number, the street number, a terrible place that didn't exist anymore. And the woman who'd run the place was gone. The doors were boarded, They walked around the back of the building and stopped to peer into the windows to see rooms that were filled with broken furniture, dusty rooms that didn't mean anything. The kitchen was smaller than he remembered. The fridge gone. No boy with the flapping hands. Maybe he'd gone too far. He could be 11 now, too. The poor boy who hadn't had a toy of his own. I don't belong here anymore. I think I never did, he said. It's not my place. He knew where he'd been, but what was most important was still missing. Mac. And that's the end of chapter 19. We just learned a lot. So, Sam just went back to the children's home on 11th Street. We just got so much information. So I want you to take a second. You can rewatch this video if you need to and think about all the parts that just happened. Try to think about, what were they trying to do? Were there problems? Were there solutions? Did we get any new information? I want you to write all of this down in your notebook for today's assignment. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.